I guess the only clever things that I could say to open up this episode with my Calgary Flames 6 is stick a fork in them. They're done. And things have cooled off on the farm as well. You'll know what I mean, as it's time for another episode of Hi there, it's Brett Hornby here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, and welcome back to another episode of my Calgary Flames in 6. We're up to Season 3. This is episode number 8. As I guess I'm still going to schedule, as per my schedule, still going to call this my Calgary Flames in 6, recapping games 37 to 42. However, with some recent events, with one of the opponents that the Calgary Flames were scheduled to play, a couple games got postponed, as I made a couple videos reacting to a couple of games that ultimately got postponed for the Calgary Flames, because fortunately we're still dealing with this global pandemic with COVID-19. It really hit the Vancouver Canucks really hard that they've been in sick bay. However, I think as of this recording, I think it got up to 25 players that got tested positive or were in COVID protocol. However, the team is reporting that the team is at least on the other end of it, so that's all good. But that affected the Calgary Flames in terms of a couple games that were scheduled that did not happen, and we'll have to eventually play catch up. However, that's not likely really going to matter as much in terms of making the playoffs, as it was fading in the last episode, but how the Flames did this episode, I think it's apparent that you're not going to make the playoffs this season. And it's time to sell, and after going under Daryl Sutter for this past month, maybe it's time to make some changes at the trade deadline. So that's just kind of like my opening and a few clever things I could say to open up this video. Still got a task at hand, as still want to recap the games, and I guess we've only got 4 more episodes to go for Season 3. Playoffs won't be happening this season for the Calgary Flames. So let's go back to Game 37. This happened on Monday, March the 29th, as the Calgary Flames were wrapping up a 3-game set at home against the Winnipeg Jets. This one was on a 8 p.m. puck drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome. As I mentioned, it was a 3-game set. It actually did start off well for the Calgary Flames, as Winnipeg takes an early penalty, 33 seconds in the game, by Andrew Kopp, and it was on that set power play. It was Elias Lindholm who scores on the power play just before the 2.5-minute mark for his 9th of the season. So Calgary took an early 1-0 lead. Coming in, Calgary and Winnipeg split this 3-game set coming in, so things are looking good. However, after that, I'd say the period remained even for both sides, However, Winnipeg did eventually score 2 quick goals of their own late in the first period. First, it was Nate Thompson who scores his 2nd of the season at 16:19 of the first period to tie up the game at 1 apiece. Then Mark Scheifele, who got his 14th of the season, scores almost 2 minutes later. So Winnipeg now takes a 2-1 lead, and that's how things stood after the first period. Winnipeg now had a 2-1 lead after the first period. Second period, well, the Mark Scheifele show continues again, as he scores again his 2nd of the game at the 3.5-minute mark to make it a 3-1 game for Winnipeg at that point. They keep their strong play going, and then Calgary Flames for much of the period were outplayed by the Winnipeg Jets in the second period. Winnipeg added to that lead as Andrew Kopp, who scored his 11th of the season, just past the 14.5-minute mark to make it a 4-1 game for Winnipeg. And that's how things stood after the second period, just 4-1 for Winnipeg. And then that also ended the night for Jacob Markstrom. He's coming into the third period. It was Dave Riddick who took over at the net for the rest of the game. Well, very early in the third period, it was Pierre-Luc Dubois. I remember him when he got drafted by the Columbus Blue Jackets after Patrick Laine, and they got traded for each other. Well, he actually scored his 7th of the season for the Winnipeg Jets at exactly 104, so I guess took advantage of a cold David Riddick, who just got in the net. So Winnipeg took an early 5-1 lead early in the third period. And that's pretty much how the game went, as Winnipeg cruised to a 5-1 victory to take 2 out of 3 against the Calgary Flames on this 3-game set. And Winnipeg wrapped up their 7-game road trip at that time, longest of the season. So that's how this one ended, 5-1 for the Winnipeg Jets. Calgary actually outshot the Winnipeg overall 30-29. Who led the way for the Winnipeg Jets? Well, obviously it was Mark Scheifele, who had 2 goals and 6 assists, let's say. Nicholas Ehlers, who had 3 assists, and Kyle Connor chipped in with 2 assists. So their key players definitely showed up for the Winnipeg Jets. Jacob Markstrom, who made 19 saves for Calgary in the 2 periods is in. And then Dave Riddick, who made 5 saves the rest of the way in the 3rd period. And it was Connor Hellebuyck, who made 29 saves for the Winnipeg Jets. So that was game 37. So game 38 was scheduled to be on Wednesday, March 31st, and the Calgary Flames were scheduled to take on the Vancouver Canucks in Vancouver. It would have been an 8:30 puck drop at Rogers Arena. However, that game ultimately got postponed due to COVID. No makeup date has been set out yet for this game. So my plan, as I mentioned in the video, and at that time it was, I think it was Adam Gaudette, who initially tested positive for COVID, but that didn't prompt the postponement. It was defenseman Travis Hamonic and a member of the Vancouver Canucks coaching staff that I think they got a notification of a positive test, I think after 5 o'clock, because this game, the lineup card was made and the Calgary Flames had their pre-game skate, but I think it wasn't 7 o'clock Calgary time where it was announced that this game was postponed. So no makeup date has been made out yet, so my plan is that whenever that game gets scheduled to play catch-up, I'll sneak it in on another episode, make note that was making up for game 38. So that was game 38 that did not happen. The Calgary Flames were not affected by it, but definitely shows you that a lot has changed in a week and a half. As I mentioned, I guess you can say 3 personnel of the Vancouver Canucks tested positive, and I think it's come out that Adam Gaudette got tested for one of the variants, and that's definitely been the cause of the recent surge here and across Canada with the COVID cases going to 3rd wave. So hopefully everyone is alright with the Vancouver Canucks, and we'll eventually get that game made up somewhere else. But that's all I have for game 38 that was scheduled. Did not happen. So game 39, this happened on Friday, April 2nd, as the Calgary Flames, the plan was that they would have, I guess they did actually go to Vancouver, thought the game was postponed, but then they went to Edmonton on Friday, April 2nd. That was a 7 p.m. puck drop at Rogers Place for another Battle of Alberta. First period, the Edmonton Oilers did outplay the Calgary Flames for much of the period. However, I felt like the Calgary Flames stole this one in the first period, as actually they took a lead. As defenseman Michael Stone, who recently got called up and played a few games with the Calgary Flames, actually scored his first of the season just before the 12.5-minute mark. So Calgary actually led 1-0 at that point and took a 1-0 lead after the first period, despite being outplayed by Edmonton. Second period, things to open up a little more for the Calgary Flames and got a little more physical. That's what you expect with the Battle of Alberta. After the opening minute, the Calgary Flames took a penalty from Chris Tanev, putting Edmonton on a power play, and Edmonton's definitely a dangerous team to be shorthanded against. On that set power play was Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, who scored his 12th of the season at exactly 1:19 to tie up this game at 1-1. So Edmonton struck back early in the second period. Calgary did regain the lead as Matthew Tkachuk scored his 10th just before the 5.5-minute mark of the second period to make it a 2-1 game for Calgary. And then just before the 11.5-minute mark, it was Dominic Cahoon for Edmonton who ties it up, as he got his 6th of the season, and now it's a 2-2 lead at that point of the second period. Shortly after the goal, it was Matthew Tkachuk for Calgary and Leon Draisaitl for Edmonton who took coincidental roughing penalties. So Matthew Tkachuk always stirring the pot. So after that, that's how things stood. It was tied at 2-2 after the second period. Going into the third period. Third period, both sides played tightly, as with this being a tight game, Battle of Alberta. Others, just before the 7-minute mark, it was Noah Hanifin who actually took a penalty given Edmonton, a power play. And then it was shortly after the face-off, it was Connor McDavid who scores his 22nd at the 7-minute mark of the Third period to put Edmonton up 3-2. With that goal, Edmonton was able to hang on, and they won this one 3-2. So Calgary wasn't able to get a tying goal late, and yet lose another tough one against the Edmonton Oilers, and yet Connor McDavid ultimately scoring the game winner, because that also happened the last time the Calgary Flames played the Edmonton Oilers in Edmonton. And then, so Calgary lost another tough one to Edmonton 3-2. Calgary did outshoot the Edmonton Oilers 26-25 overall. Leo's Ryan Draisaitl was the only player on the ice who had a multi-point game for this game, chipped in with 2 assists. It was Jacob Markstrom who made 22 saves for Calgary. Well, it was Mike Smith for Edmonton who made 24 saves, so that was game 39. So game 40, this happened on Sunday, April the 4th, as the Calgary Flames now come back home for a back-to-back with the Toronto Maple Leafs. So this game was a 7 p.m. puck drop at the Scotiabank Saddle, first of back-to-back as mentioned. First period, Toronto struck very early. It was Morgan Riley who scored his 4th of the season at 58 seconds in to give Toronto an early 1-0 lead. However, that didn't seem to totally face Calgary, as Calgary did keep up with their play, and Calgary was able eventually to tie it up. And it was Joachim Nordstrom who actually scored his first of the season versus the Calgary Flame at 11:43 to make this a 1-1 game. Then going into the final minute, actually Calgary takes a 2-1 lead as Andrew Mangiapane scores his 11th at the time, so Calgary takes a 2-1 lead at that point and takes a 2-1 lead going into the first intermission. The second period, the Calgary Flames did have a slight edge in play overall. There was really nothing much to report. As we're noticing games as they're going down the stretch, there's been fewer and fewer penalties, and there hasn't been any fights to highlight. However, Toronto did tie things up at 2-2, as it was Alex Galchenyuk who got his 2nd of the season, just past the 17-minute mark. So that's how things stood after the second period. It was a 2-2 game going into the third period. Third period, eventually the big guns for the Toronto Maple Leafs pulled ahead and put this one away for them. First, Toronto takes a 3-2 lead, as it was John Tavares who scores his 11th just before the 7-minute mark. And then Austin Matthews, who is the league leader in goals right now. At this point, he scored his 25th of the season, just past the 9-minute mark to make it a 4-2 game for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Calgary didn't have much pushback or an answer to ultimately Toronto takes this one 4-2. Calgary did actually outshoot the Toronto Maple Leafs 34-30. Overall, Calgary was led, or Calgary didn't have anyone leading the way as no multi-point game. Toronto was led by Austin Matthews with a goal and assist, and it was William Nylander who chipped in with 2 assists. And then when it comes to the goaltending story of the game, Dave Riddick, he made 26 saves for the Calgary Flames, while Michael Hutchinson, who made 32 saves for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So that was game number 40. So game 41, this happened on the next night, on Monday, April 5th. It's the second nights, Flames and Toronto Maple Leafs. First period, there was no scoring report, but it felt like Calgary played a little bit better after being outplayed the third period the night before. So it was 0-0 after the first period. The second period, the Toronto Maple Leafs did get on the board first, as it was Jason Spezza who got his 9th of the season, just past the 3-minute mark. So it was 1-0 for Toronto at that point. Then it was Austin Matthews who strikes again, scores his 26th of the season, just before the 8-minute mark to make it a 2-0 lead for Toronto at the 8-minute mark of the second period. Calgary did push back, but it wasn't until just past the 18-minute mark of the second period. It was Andrew Mangiapane who scores his 12th of the season at that time to make it a 2-1 game. So Toronto now led 2-1 after the second period. Third period was a bit of a wild one, I would say, in the first half. First, Michael Backlund actually scores his 7th of the season at exactly 4:17 in the third period to tie this game up at 2-2. Then it was Wayne Simmons who scores his 6th 3 minutes later for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So now the Toronto Maple Leafs have a 3-2 lead. Then Michael Backlund actually scores again, 2nd of the game at shorthanded, just past the 10-minute mark to make it a 3-3 game. However, the big guns again for the Toronto Maple Leafs had other plans, as actually on that same penalty that the Calgary Flames scored shorthanded on. It was Austin Matthews. He also decided he wanted to have a 2-goal game, just like Michael Backlund. He got his 2nd of the game on the power play just before the 11-minute mark, so now Toronto takes a 4-2-3 lead. There was John Tavares 2 minutes later who scores his 12th to make it a 5-3 game for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Ultimately, the Calgary Flames couldn't answer back as Toronto takes this one 5-3. So Toronto takes the 2 games in back-to-back nights against the Calgary Flames on the road. It didn't help much that Calgary had a late double-minded penalty to have any hope to get him back into this game. Toronto actually outshot Calgary 30-29 overall. Calgary was led by Michael Backlund, who had 2 goals, and then, excuse me, then Elias Lindholm chipped in with 2 assists, so that's who led the way for the Calgary Flames. Toronto, well, they were led by Austin Matthews, who had 2 goals, and then John Tavares had a goal and assist, and then William Nylander chipped in with 2 assists. So when it comes to the goaltending story of the game, it was Jacob Markstrom, who made 25 saves for Calgary, well, it was Jack Campbell, who made 26 saves for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So that was game number 41. So game 42, well, this was scheduled to be against the Vancouver Canucks at home. It would have been a 7 p.m. puck drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome. Once again, the situation with COVID kept running its course through the Vancouver Canucks. So that game is postponed, and as I mentioned with the previous game that was postponed, there is no word on when that game is going to be made up. But as I mentioned, I'll mention that I'll be able to catch up whenever that game happens to be made up in a future episode. So where do the Calgary Flames stand as now we're looking ahead at the standings? Well, the Calgary Flames, well, in this case, they've only played 40 games as 2 games were postponed. They are 16, 21-3 for 35 points, which puts them 6th in the North All-Canadian Division and playoffs. Ain't happening this year. There's no point even looking at sportsclubstats.com or moneypuck.com as the percentage is less than 1%. So let's just take a look at the stats and standings, shall we, to give you an idea of who leads the way for the Calgary Flames. Well, Johnny Gaudreau is still leading the way with 13 goals for the Calgary Flames. I'd say all the top guns, I mean, things definitely have dried up, I'm going to say, offensively. Since the coaching change, I mean, we've been playing a little better defensively, but you might have to wonder, do we find that balance, or we're going to probably see a change in the roster. With the trade deadline, I mean, Andrew Mangiapane is 2nd with 12, Matthew Tkachuk 3rd with 10, and then Elias Lindholm has 4 goals and 9, and Michael Backlund with 8 goals to round out the top 5. Leading assists, well, Elias Lindholm still leads the team with assists at 24. Then Matthew Tkachuk has 18 assists, and one has 16. Johnny Gaudreau and Michael Backlund are tied at 4th with 14 assists each. So leading point getter, well, it's Elias Lindholm with 33, and then Matthew Tkachuk with 28. Johnny Gaudreau 27, Sean Monahan at 23, and Michael Backlund with 22. So I'm going to say that actually the Calgary Flames in the North Division, I believe actually we are the lowest scoring team in the division, even though the North Division has the highest goals per game. So then when it comes to the goaltending story of the game, well, Jacob Markstrom, I'm going to say he definitely has not been the same. They're saying when he got collided with Tanner Pearson and, with a concussion, he has not been the same. As in 28 games, he's 12, 14, and 2. He actually has a .302 goals against average and a .998 save percentage. So definitely his stats have dropped off, and he still has the 2 shutouts. And then David Riddick, well, he's in 15 games, he is 4-7-1 with a .290 goals against average and a .904 save percentage, and he has that 1 shutout. So that's just basically the story when it comes to the Calgary Flames and their goaltending. Let's just take a look at team stats again. Well, on the power play, the Calgary Flames are tied for 17th with the New York Rangers with a 19.9 percentage. Carolina is actually leading the way with 29.7%, and actually the Edmonton Oilers are just behind at second at 27.1%. So Edmonton's not a team you want to be short-handed with. Penalty kill. Where do the Calgary Flames rank in penalty kill as of this recording? They're actually tied for 13th with the Florida Panthers at exactly 80%. The Boston Bruins are leading the way with 87.7%. And then shots against per game, the Calgary Flames are actually 14th, tied with Pittsburgh and St. Louis and Anaheim Colorado's leading the way with 25, so that's basically the quick when it comes to the team stats. And then when it comes to league leaders, when it comes to, let's go back to league leaders when it comes to, points-wise, well, Connor McDavid, he's leading the league with 69 points, followed by Leon Draisaitl with 61. Patrick Kane is third with 51 points. Austin Matthews and Mitchell Marner round out the top five, tied at fourth with 48 points each. And when it comes to goals, well, Austin Matthews leads the way with 28. Connor McDavid with 23. Leon Draisaitl with 22. Tied with Mikko Rantanen of Colorado, 22. And Alex DeBrincat and Alexander Ovechkin are on the top five with 20 goals each. So, looks like right now, you could say the Art Ross winner still goes to Connor McDavid in Edmonton, and the Rocket Richard goes to Austin Matthews in Toronto. Leading when it comes to assists, well, Connor McDavid leads at 46. Leon Draisaitl with 39 assists. Patrick Kane with 37 assists. Mitchell Marner with 35 at fourth. And then Nathan McKinnon and Anze Kopitar tied for fifth with 32 assists. So that's just like the quick stat leaders. Now, if you look at divisions, this is definitely where we're going to say we're done when it comes to the Calgary Flames. If you look at the North All-Canadian division, well, Toronto is leading away in first place. After 40 games, they're 27-10-3 for 57 points. Second place is Edmonton. After 41 games, they're 25-14-2 for 52 points. And then Winnipeg, after 40 games, they're 24-13-3 for 51 points. And then top four is Montreal, and they're still playing catch-up after they were shut down for COVID. After 37 games, they're 17-11-9 for 43 points. So I'm going to say, I'm at least hoping for a Toronto-Montreal first round. That's what it will look like, and Edmonton would host Winnipeg. So that's how it would look like if the playoffs were to begin right now. I mean, they put Vancouver at fifth. After 37 games, they're 16-18-3 for 35 points. After 40 games, well, the Calgary Flames are 16-21-3 for 35 points. We are 7 points behind the Montreal Canadiens, and they got 3 games in hand. I don't like our odds. And then Ottawa is running out the North All-Canadian division. After 41 games, they're 13-24-4 for 30 points. So I think the top four is set when it comes to the playoffs in the North All-Canadian division. Central division, well, the Carolina Hurricanes lead the way. After 39 games, they're 27-9-3 for 57 points. Then you got the Tampa Bay Lightning. After 40 games, they're 27-11-2 for 56 points. And then in third place, you got the Florida Panthers. After 41 games, they're 26-11-4 for 56 points. So the top three is definitely going to be a dogfight. And then the Nashville Predators, actually, they suddenly have turned it on. They are now in the top four, actually comfortably. After 41 games, they're 22-18-1 for 45 points. So right now, you would have Carolina hosting Nashville and a battle of Florida with Tampa Bay hosting Florida. Outside, well, Chicago now looks like they have slipped out. After 41 games, they're 18-5 for 41 points. They're 4 points behind Nashville for the playoff cut line. Dallas, I mean, they're still playing catch-up, but they're probably running out of real estate. After 38 games, they're 14-10 for 38 points. Columbus Blue Jackets, I think their playoff hopes are gone. After 42 games, they're 15-19-8 for 38 points. Keep in mind, it's a 56-game season. And then Detroit rounds out the top, or the whole Central Division. They're in 8th place after 42 games. They're 13-23-6 for 32 points. So I'm going to say Nashville, the way they're turning on, I think the top four is set in the Central Division. Look at the Honda West. Well, I think there's a surprise. Couple surprises, I would say. Well, it's not a surprise. Colorado is leading after 39 games. They're 26-9-4, 56 points. Vegas is in second. After 38 games, they're 25-11-2 for 52 points. I don't think it's a surprise that Colorado and Vegas are in the top of this West Division. Minnesota, I would definitely say, has been a surprise. After 38 games, they're 24-12-2 for 50 points. And then Arizona. Yes, Arizona rounds up the top four. After 40 games, they're 19-16-5. Below the playoff cut line, I would be disappointed if I was St. Louis. After 39 games, they're 17-16-6 for 40 points, so they're 3 points behind Arizona. Although they have a game in hand, but I know Arizona and St. Louis played each other a lot in the first part of the season. San Jose may have a shot. After 38 games, they're 17-17-4 for 38 points. And then you got the Los Angeles Kings. After 38 games, they're 15-17-6 for 36 points. And then the Anaheim Ducks, they're just playing out the string as well. After 40 games, they're 12-21-7, 31 points. So looking at the Honda West Division, Colorado, Arizona, they might get to play each other again after the first round last season. And then Vegas and Minnesota, it'll just be a first time that they'll meet each other in the playoffs. So I'm going to say, just surprised that St. Louis has slipped, but Colorado and Vegas, I think, are still the class of the Honda West Division. Then the Mass Mutual East Division, I think we're starting to see who's going to be the top four in this division. Well, the New York Islanders lead the way after 40 games. They're 26-10-4 for 56 points. Followed by the Washington Capitals. After 40 games, they're 25-11-4 for 54 points. And then the Pittsburgh Penguins. So there's suddenly going to be a dogfight for first in this division. After 40 games, they're 25-13-2, 52 points. And then rounding up the top four in the playoffs is the Boston Bruins. After 37 games, they're 21-10-6 for 48 points. Below the playoff cut line, I think these are going to be the teams that are going to be outside the playoffs. Philadelphia, they're 39 games, they're 18-15-6 for 42 points. So Boston has 2 games in hand, they're 6 points ahead of Philadelphia. Kind of the same situation in the North Division. The New York Rangers, after 39 games, they're 18-16-5 for 41 points. They're looking better, but I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. There wasn't really expectations for the Rangers to make the playoffs this year. Then the New Jersey Devils, after 38 games, are 14-18-6 for 34 points. And then the Buffalo Sabres, well, they've actually won some games in between after losing 18. Well, after 39 games, they're 9-24-6 for 24 points. So it looks like you'll have the Islanders hosting Boston potentially. That could be a bad matchup for Boston. And then another Washington-Pittsburgh for the 28th time, it seems like. Or maybe I'm right. I just threw that number out there that they'll play each other in the playoffs. So it's looking like there's not really much when it comes to playoff races. I think the top four in the North Division is going to be the top four. Central Division, well, I think the top 3 are definitely set. I think Nashville is starting to pull away that they're going to be in the playoffs. Looking at the Honda West Division, well, Colorado, Vegas, we knew likely were going to make it. Minnesota looks like they're in good shape, but I'm surprised to see Arizona, St. Louis, and maybe San Jose. I think that's where the one race could be for that final playoff spot. And then the Mass Mutual East, I think the top 4 currently are going to make the playoffs. So I think there's less dramatic, well, I guess with all divisional play, there's just a little less dramatics this year when it comes to playoff races, or it just didn't pan out to be what's expected. But I guess when you're playing each other so much, you kind of know each other, and that's what's going to make the playoffs more interesting when the playoffs are drawn, on seeing who plays who and what could happen. So when it comes to this season series, the Calgary Flames versus the North Canadian Division, well, Calgary's still 4-2 against the Vancouver Canucks. It's the only team that Calgary's had their way with this season, with the exception of COVID postponing 2 games. The Edmonton Oilers, well, Calgary's 2-5 against Edmonton. So that's one team that's definitely sunk us, especially with a couple of tough losses. Well, Calgary's 3-4-1 against the Winnipeg Jets. Well, we definitely lost some ground on them. Toronto Maple Leafs, well, we're 2-5-1 against Toronto, and if we were to somehow have a miracle and get into the playoffs, we would likely play the Toronto Maple Leafs. And then the Ottawa Senators, well, that's the team that definitely has given us trouble. We're 2-4-1 against Ottawa. And then Montreal, well, team that we could still maybe catch, but very unlikely. We're 3-1 against Montreal, and they're playing catch up, and more often than not, they've won a couple of games in hand. So that's how the season series looks against the other teams in the North Canadian Division. So now let's shift our attention to the Stockton Heat. So here's that. So yeah, the Stockton Heat, I mean, they lost a couple games, the first 2 games of the regular season. Then they won 8 straight, but they definitely have cooled off. And I think one team definitely really cooled off the Stockton Heat is the Laval Rocket. So let's just take a look at how the Stockton Heat went, how things went on the farm. Well, Game 18, that was on Monday, March 29th, as the Stockton Heat were in Toronto to take on the Toronto Marlies at the Coca-Cola Coliseum. That was actually a 12 p.m. puck drop. Toronto won that game 4-3. Highlight, Connor Mackey, Adam Rajicka, and Colton Beck each had a goal. And then Colton Pullman had a fight in that game. Artem Zagadulin, he made 22 saves on 26 shots. So game 19, this happened on Wednesday, March 31st, as the Stockton Heat, I keep saying Calgary, but Stockton Heat, taking out Toronto Marlies again, 5 p.m. puck jump at the Coke Coliseum. Toronto won this one 5-2. Luke Phillip and Emilio Pedersen each had a goal. Toronto scored 4 goals in the third period. That's one thing to highlight. Garrett Starts, he made 26 saves on 30 shots. So game 20, this was on Friday, April 2nd, as the Stockton Heat continued their road trip, this time against Laval Rocket in the Bell Centre in Montreal. And the Laval Rocket shut out the Stockton Heat 3-0. I should highlight that it was a 5 p.m. puck drop. Alex Gallant actually had 22 penalty minutes in this one. Same with Colt T. Wilson. There was definitely some fighting in this game. Artem Zagadulin, he made 19 saves on 22 shots, so that's all I can highlight, just penalty minute leaders, because of a couple fights, since no one scored for the Stockton Heat in that game. The Heat scored just as much as I did on Good Friday. So game 21 on Sunday, April the 4th, the Stockton Heat were continuing on their series with the Laval Rocket. Well, the Laval Rocket won 4-2 in this one. That was this game what happened on, like I say, a 5 p.m. puck drop at the Bell Centre in Montreal. There was Mark Simpson and Adam Rajicka each had a goal. Garrett Sparks made 34 saves on 37 shots. And then the last game in the Stockton Heat Quick Hits segment on game 22 on Tuesday, April 6th, the Stockton Heat were taking on the Laval Rocket again in Montreal at the Bell Centre, 5 p.m. puck drop, and actually the Stockton Heat won this one 3-1, so at least when it comes to the quick hits, the Stockton Heat won the last game. Our Adam Rajicka, Byron Freeze, and Ita Tuloa each scored a goal. Glenn Godwin had a fight in this one, and then Garrett Sparks made 28 saves on 29 shots. So how did the Stockton Heat look in the Canadian Division in the American Hockey League? Well, after 22 games, they're 10-11-1 for 21 points. That puts them third out of 5 teams in the Canadian Division in the American Hockey League. And I think the American Hockey League's not going to have a Calder Cup playoffs this season, but the Stockton Heat definitely has cooled off, just like the Calgary Flames. After the Stockton Heat, at one point, they were first in the Canadian Division. So now let's take a look ahead to the next 6 games for the Calgary Flames, as we're pretty much just playing out the string, and we're going to have the trade deadline that's going to happen in between. And if the Calgary Flames do anything major enough, I'm expecting them to sell some assets. I'll make a video on it. I'm not going to make a video if they trade away, let's say, a mid-round pick for a depth player that's going to spend time on the taxi squad. But to look ahead, game 43 would be on Saturday, April the 10th, as the Calgary Flames will actually be taking on the Edmonton Oilers instead, as that game has been rescheduled from originally scheduled on Friday, May the 7th, because the Calgary Flames were scheduled to take on the Vancouver Canucks back-to-back at home. But with the Vancouver Canucks being in sick bay still with COVID, we will be taking on the Edmonton Oilers again on that same night. This will be an 8 p.m. puck drop at the Scotiabank Saddledome. So there will still be a game to watch the Calgary Flames on Hockey Night in Canada, but we'll be hosting the Edmonton Oilers instead of the Vancouver Canucks. Then game 44 on Tuesday, April the 13th, the Calgary Flames will head off to Toronto to take on the Toronto Maple Leafs. That'll be a 5:30 puck drop at the Scotiabank Arena. And then game 45 will be on Wednesday, April the 14th. The Calgary Flames will be taking on the Montreal Canadiens. That'll be a 5 p.m. puck drop at the Bell Centre. And then game 46 will be on Friday, April 16th. The Calgary Flames will be taking on the Montreal Canadiens again. That'll be a 5 p.m. puck drop at the Bell Centre. And then they'll have the weekend off because game 47 will be on Monday, April the 19th. The Calgary Flames will come back home to take on the Ottawa Senators at home. That'll be a 7 p.m. puck drop at Scotiabank Saddledome. And then game 48 will be on Tuesday, April 20th, as the Calgary Flames will be taking on the Ottawa Senators again at home for a 7 p.m. puck drop to wrap up their season series with the Ottawa Senators. The trade deadline will be on Monday, April the 12th, so it depends to see who will be on the Calgary Flames then in the next episode. But if the Calgary Flames do anything major that I find it's worth making a video on, I'll talk about it. But if it's just, a depth or don't do anything, well, obviously I'm not going to make a video on it. And if there's any other significant trades that worth highlighting league-wide, I might mentioned in that episode as well. So that's all I have for my Calgary Flames in 6, recapping how games 37-42 went, or at least the games they were able to play. So those games, I'll sneak it in whenever those games get rescheduled in follow-up episodes, or maybe those games will get tacked on at the end of the year, as now the NHL has scheduled for May 11th for the regular season to end from May the 8th, but that's where they have that 2-week buffer. So I might have a feeling that maybe those couple games that the Calgary Flames will play against the Vancouver Canucks might be played then. We don't know, but find out when it happens. So as I say, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, home of Flames hit in the rough next to Stampeders, I mostly do talk Calgary sports on my YouTube channel, like recapping games or talking stories, but I also do a variety of non-sports content as well, like personal vlogs, attempt to comedy, and I also do share my experience I'm on the road or at a sporting event. So if that all sounds like it'd be interesting to watch, to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, you know what you do, just make sure you like, subscribe. I also have my other social media links down in the description below. So I'm still going to say go Flames go, even though playoffs is very, very unlikely for the Calgary Flames in 2011. I'm just hoping for at least a Toronto-Montreal first round. It's been too long since those two teams have met in the playoffs. So that could be interesting if that actually happens. So anyways, I'll say thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.